Everyone, my name is Beverly. Today is February 17th. It is 1:33 a.m. A few months back, I read a dream, but I didn't interpret it. I just tacked it on at the last part of the video because it was kind of related, and I said I'd come back and explain it. Well, the dream was from October, so it's been quite a while. So anyway, some things that I've been seeing and hearing lately really reminded me of it and pressed me to come back and share it, so I will. All right. Oh, I actually typed it into the computer. Let's see if I can find it. Hopefully you can hear me. Since it is so late, I don't want to be speaking really loud, but I'll try keep my voice up. Okay, so this dream was from October the 15th, 2019. So today is February 17th, 2020, if I didn't say that. 2020. So, on October 15th of last year, I dreamed this. The world was in flux and turmoil. This family had one older son, about 17 or so, and two young sons who were toddlers. Brad Pitt played the teen, and the two young sons were played by young boys that looked like him too. So, in this dream, Brad Pitt was only 17, so it was in the past. There was trouble brewing, and he was joking, telling them about knowing they didn't understand and they were playing. So they were just kind of like horsing around his feet and wrestling around. And he was interacting with them, but they were in their own little kid world. But the world was in like a disaster, like it was a movie. And everything was just like I said, in flux and in turmoil. And flux meant there were just changes everywhere. Everything was unstable. And, yeah. So the kids were playing around. They were very young, like 2, 3 years old. Maybe 4. And it was just like it was a movie scene, and how sometimes like a person is kind of talking to themselves, but he was talking to the little kids, and he was like, yeah, you guys have no idea what's going on in the world. And he was kind of like joking around, just like making, how sometimes they do in the movies, make light of a serious situation, just how they say, laugh, keep from crying. So he was like, I know you guys can't possibly understand what's going on now. And they were playing and giggling because they didn't understand. And then he made a joke about telling them, if you guys had any girlfriends, I could take them too, because he knew he was like he knew that he was like a heartthrob. So he knew that all young girls would go crazy over him. So he was saying, if you guys were older, and if you had any little girlfriends, they would have crushes on me. It was just something joking that he was saying, as if this was really a movie. It was like watching a movie. So then They were playing around. They had no idea what he was saying. So then there was another area, and seems like it was in the same house, or maybe not, but it was like a new scene. And Tom Hanks and someone else, they were dealing with the conflict. So it was the same time. The conflict was going on everywhere. So Tom Hanks and this other person in the scene, they were dealing with the conflict. And I was there looking through an old box or a trunk of some of my things. And I don't know what this has to do with anything, but I'll just read it. I had some pink and green sequin fabric. And another thing, something else in the box that I was wondering how I could repurpose it. I used to have a piece of fabric like the one I saw in the dream. I used to actually have that piece of fabric. So anyway, at some point, now this part I'm not going to read. I don't know, I'll kind of mask it a little bit. So then there was another person that I knew in the dream. And this person was making tiny little decorative things, but there was something wrong with them. They weren't very well made. And then this same person was putting this stuff in her hair that was kind of like hair fibers. It was kind of like dye and hair fibers. And she was rubbing it in her scalp. And she had been doing this. And each time she would rub it in her scalp, she was like kind of throwing hints at me, like I should rub some of that in my scalp. It's like some stuff that you use for thin hair. Or if you have, guys might put that in their hair to cover up baldness. They put some powder in their hair and then they sprinkle that black stuff on it or whatever. But she was using that stuff. And her hair was all gray, really. But after she put all that black stuff in it, and she was trying to get me to use it, and I got angry. And I'm like, I'm not putting that junk in my hair. And she was turning her scalp black with it. And like I said, it was hiding that her hair was really gray. And I thought that it was vanity and foolishness. And besides, my scalp wasn't bald. And I hardly had any gray hair. And I thought it was such a silly thing to be thinking about, with everything in society and in the world being so upside down. So the whole world was just in a disaster, like you would see in a movie. Like, say, that movie Independence Day or something. How the whole world was just like at a stop because of a common disaster. So anyway, and this person seemed very underhanded. And everything that would have been appropriate under these circumstances for someone to be paying attention to, those were the things that she was unconcerned with. She was preoccupied with things that didn't matter. So anyway, now back to the area where it seemed like Tom Hanks and this other person was, where I had the box at. So the other person there was this lady, and I think maybe she was the boy's mother. I thought that she was these little boys' mother and the older boy. But Tom Hanks was not their father. Anyway, there was massive civil unrest everywhere, and it was being televised and broadcast. Massive civil unrest was everywhere. And there was a right side and a wrong side. But the thing was, when you listen to them describe wrong and right, either side could be the wrong side that they were describing. Like when I listened to it, there clearly was a right side and a wrong side. But when you really listen to it, either one of them could have been the wrong side. You could understand why each one of them felt like they were right. Okay. So the description fit either side depending on your viewpoint. I wasn't on either side, but one side seemed to be clearly totally wrong and evil and wild and causing all of the trouble. There were two sides. And one of them was causing all the trouble. They were wild, unreasonable, just wicked. So one side was just like awful. So I sat near the box of my old stuff. As I sat near the box of my old stuff, I was listening to all the news reports of the clashes and turmoil. I heard one of the wild, wrong liberals speaking, and I realized that each one of these sides, they hear themselves as the good guys. Hands down. No contest. And they don't question or stop to think any differently. Because the narrative that they have been given to discuss and argue about is forest and trees. What I meant by forest and trees is that it's not that some of the issues that the liberals discuss, it's not that every one of their issues, most of them are nonsense. But some of the things that they say are things that you can understand people being concerned about. But the problem is their solutions are nutty. They want a government that can solve problems that no government can solve. They want a government that can solve problems that people should be solving in other ways. They don't realize that you cannot empower a government to do the things that they think government ought to be doing. It is not the government's job to raise people's children. It's not the government's job to support children. You do not want a government that is empowered to do all those things, because governments are not machines. Our government is not made up of holy angels. The Lord Jesus Christ is not yet having the government on his shoulders. So that our government, and any government that you set up, is going to be run by fallen human beings with a fallen and sinful nature. If you give people the powers, the resources, the latitude to address and solve the type of problems that liberals have been convinced that government should be solving, you are going to be empowering a dictatorship. And the foolishness of it is that they actually do not have any comprehension or enough connection to reality to recognize evil, even though they see evil all around them every day. When they leave their house, they lock the doors. When they get out of their cars, they lock the doors. When they go to an ATM machine, they look around before they put in their password or their PIN numbers. They put passwords on everything they have. They put their wallets in their inside pocket. Because on the one hand, they know that evil exists and that it's in people. They're not worried about birds breaking in their house while they're going to work. They know that it's people that do these things. But those same people that you're going to elect, put in office, and those same precedents of power in government that you're going to allow to be set up, the same nature that's in the people that break in houses is in the people who occupy the halls of government and who pull the strings behind the people who occupy the halls of government. So it's like they cannot make this connection. Why can't they make that connection? Yes, there are problems in the world. Yes, there are problems in society. But the answer to those problems is not to empower a huge, unquestioned government that doesn't answer to anybody, that doesn't have to follow any rules, that will not be bound by something like a constitution, that will say, yes, we have a problem. There is a problem in our society. But we have set some rules that no matter what problem we have, breaking these rules cannot be the way we solve them. There's a question that was being posed to school children. This is ridiculous, but it was actually being posed to school children as they were indoctrinating them to, the question was the lifeboat question. We only have so many lifeboats. There's an old man who's lived his life. This is real. There's an old man that's lived his life. There's a pregnant woman. There's, these different people. There's a doctor. And we only have, the ship is sinking. And there's only room in the lifeboats for everybody but one person. Who do we let drown? Okay. Now, the answer is to say we are children of a creator, and he is the giver of life and the lover of life. And before we would take it into our hands to make such a decision, we would inquire of him. Lord, we seem to be in an impossible situation. You specialize in impossible situations. What do we do? And analogous to setting a constitution, you would say, in this scenario, you would say, we have our rule, our law, the law of our land, that no one can make a decision that somebody cannot get on the lifeboat. Now, whatever decision we choose, whatever we decide to do, it cannot include throwing someone overboard. And that's something like what they did with the Constitution. Now, whatever problems that this country will face in the coming years, this is what they were saying when they agreed to these first 10 amendments to the Constitution. Whatever happens, no matter what the problem is, this government, this land will not institute laws that restrict people's right to speak freely. The right of free speech was absolute. The right to keep and bear arms, that's weapons, guns, was absolute. And it didn't matter whatever problem came up in society. I don't care how you handle it, but taking away free speech, taking away religious freedom, taking away guns, and the other things, free press, the right to address and challenge the government. These are absolute rights that exist, that no law could be made that interfered with those absolute rights. Now, what the liberals don't understand is that if you do, it doesn't matter. They can come up with, and they're famous for coming up with all these crazy what ifs. You cannot have a discussion about abortion without somebody bringing up somebody being raped by their father. When this is an extreme case. And I've never personally heard of a person wanting an abortion because they were raped by their father. All the people that I ever knew that had abortions were just being sexually irresponsible. Period. But they're famous for bringing out these far, way out, outlying scenarios to try to justify every case of a thing that should never even be happening. So, if you can't murder anybody, and we're going to have a law, we're going to have a country of laws and justice, murder cannot be part of that. So up until 1971, or was it 1973, abortion was illegal. Because it was known by every person with half of a brain or less that if you kill a baby before it's born, it is still a human being. And you have just committed a killing, a murder. So, what they'll do is they want to try to find strange and wild exceptions. Strange, wild, crazy exceptions to get you to throw away the rule. But you have to have in your world, in any society, in anything that you have to have some truth. You have to have some things that are truth, that are pillars, that are unshakable, and that no matter how big a problem is, how far and wide we've searched for a solution. There are just some things that you're not going to do. It's like when people get married and they say, no matter what, divorce is not an option for our marriage. No matter how many children the Lord blesses us with, no matter how tight things get, we're not going to abort any of our children. We're going to trust the Lord to provide for those children. So you have to have some lines that you don't cross. These are truth. And the problem with the liberals is they don't have any of those. It's just whatever fits the situation at the moment. And it's inconsistent from one scenario to the next. They don't have any bedrock up under them. They're just drifting down the tailpipe to crazy town because they take all of these ideas and they just run with them down to the extreme. I watched a video the other day where a guy was on a college campus. This is where this stuff is the worst, because these people are old enough to keep up a stink, but young enough to have not lived long enough to find out that the things that they're talking about don't work. That stuff they want to try has already been done, and it doesn't work. They haven't lived long enough to run into the truth, to find out that there's a way that seems right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. There's some things that can seem like they could work. Oh yeah, that seems like it'll work. But life has a way of teaching you what's stupid, what's impossible. So these young liberals on the college campuses and newly graduated from the campuses, freshly indoctrinated with nonsense. Things that can't work, don't work, have never worked, have already failed. But they believe in these things wholeheartedly, untested, and they're ready to throw out everything and just try it. So, I mean, these kids are just, they're literally ready to burn down society. They're ready to burn down society. Not that there are not legitimate social ills that people should be concerned about. But the question is, what can you do about them? You cannot pass laws to make people be moral. How can you try and enforce laws on a governmental level against all the social ills that we see when those social ills are caused by sin? Oh, we ought to feed all these poor children. The answer to 90% of all those poor children is for people to stop fornicating. Stop bringing children into impoverished and unwed situations. Then you wouldn't have to have a welfare system. And certainly it wouldn't be as vast as what it is if it was only limited to people whose spouses died, or women who may have been raped and became pregnant, or people who were legitimately handicapped. But for the most part, we just have created an entire segment of the population that is dependent on the welfare state. They're dependent on the government to provide for them. And the problem with the liberals is that they cannot see the fact that this should not be. This cannot be. Any government that gets on this road is absolutely on their way to collapse. They also cannot see that they are being used. They've been pumped full of these ideas, and they're being used to destabilize not just our country, but countries all throughout the world. They're using these so-called social issues. These social issues are moral issues. Moral issues cannot be solved through government. The moral problem that man has is his rebellion against the law of God, against the knowledge of God, against the correction of God. And short of everybody dropping everything and following Jesus Christ, these problems are not going to be solved. They're going to continue to get worse. And the liberals are going to continue to scream for more government. More government, more government. Playing right into the hands of the people who want to grow the government. Because they've taken it over. When I was about 4, maybe slightly younger, 3 or 4. Maybe 3 going on 4. My brother put a plastic bag over his head. He was about 5, maybe 6. He put a plastic bag over his head that had a drawstring on it. I will never forget the bag. It was a white bag, and it had a fern on it. It had a picture of a fern on it. And I watched him. My mother was in the house, but she was in another room. I watched him with the bag on his head, and I saw him begin to struggle. Like I said, I was very young. And I saw him panicking and struggling, trying to get the bag off. But his way of trying to get the bag off was to pull it. He was pulling on the string, which was around his neck. And the only thing he was doing was making it tighter and tighter. So I guess my mother heard the commotion and she came in the room and ripped the bag open and off of him. Now, between me and him, he'd have died because neither one of us had sense enough to rip the bag open. The only thing he knew to do was to try to get it off the same way he got it on, pulling on it. And this is how the liberals are. They're screaming for more of what has caused the problem in the first place. The conditions that created most of the social ills that we have in our society right now were created by government. So by screaming for more government, it's just like my brother pulling that bag tighter and tighter around his neck. This is what got you in this problem in the first place. Welfare. Creating a situation where young women will have children out of wedlock. And those children raised in outside of that structure that God created to raise godly children, they will be impoverished. They will not be a godly seed. Because it takes two parents to do this thing right. One person is going to be mentally, physically, and spiritually exhausted and depleted by raising children by themselves. And as a result of that, many people run from their responsibilities of raising their children. They put their kids in daycare. They celebrate when school starts back. They plop their kids in front of TVs. They leave their kids at home alone. A lot of these women just go from relationship to relationship to relationship. Just drowning themselves from man to man to man. Running from all the pressures that are placed on them by having become a single parent. I need some me time. I need some happiness for myself. The family was designed by God to supply all of that while still taking care of the needs of the people inside that family. Instead of women making children and then the man that they make them with abandoning them, and then they got to go chase new men and neglect the children while they do that. And then these men don't care about these children because they're not their seed. All made possible by a monthly welfare check. All encouraged by a monthly welfare check. And it just becomes a situation that exists because it exists, and then because it exists, it perpetuates, and then it continues, and it goes on and on and on. And then you have more and more and more and more people who really would really have a very difficult time if you cut it off. All these people trapped in these inner cities where there just are no jobs. You can only serve each other so many hamburgers when you don't have a real economy inside these cities. when the children really haven't been raised and disciplined enough, and they're not integrated into the society as a whole to be able to function within it. Everybody can't be an accountant. Everybody's not going to be a doctor. The accountant, he's going to keep track of the finances for a business, and that business has to make something. So you're going to have some laborers. You're going to have somebody that sweeps up the floor. You're going to have somebody who installs the lights, installs the plumbing. And then all those people have to eat. So you're going to need some farmers. Everybody's going to have somewhere to go home. You're going to need some houses. We're not doing any of those things. Everybody's trying to cram into the same few jobs. That is not an economy. An economy is where the people who live in an area produce the things that are needed by the rest of the people that live in that area. You don't have to send to Chile or Chile for your grapes. If there was nothing coming in from Chile, no one should starve. But the way we live in these cities, if you miss a day or two of the trucks coming in with the food, riots, empty grocery stores, chaos and violence. No one can live this way. This is not the way people were designed to live. No society can live this way. We have set up a system like a room when you're painting the floor and you painted yourself into a corner and you can't get back out. Or you're sitting in a tree, sawing on a branch that you're sitting on. This is not the way to run a country, what we're doing. And that's a problem that government can't fix. Government cannot fix a morally bankrupt people, especially when the government has been taken over by people who want you morally bankrupt. Where they'll go in the schools and teach you immorality. We've all been through school. Think back to your sociology classes, your psychology classes, your health/sex ed classes. Think back to all the stuff they taught you. If you heard anything about God, they were teaching you about Islam. Or I remember we did a whole unit in English on the Greek and Roman gods. But nothing about the real God that would teach us how to have a good society. And it's not through growing a great big government to police everybody and to make sure no one says anything mean to each other. The answer is for people to have a fear of God. I had a terrible conversation at the end of last year with some of these young people where they were arguing that it is wrong to fear God. That they were saying that it's not possible to love someone who you fear. It is not possible to have a society that people can actually live in if no one fears God. Where do you start with people who don't think they should fear God? There's nothing we can do. There's nothing God can do but destroy this place. Where people think the fear of God is wrong. Learning to fear God was the best thing that ever happened to me. That's the beginning of being corrected. That's the beginning of getting it right. Is learning what you can't do. Learning what will destroy you. And learning to stay away from that. That's the fear of God. To learn that there are some absolute no-nos. And if you want to die, do it. If you want to die, do those things. If you want to die, don't have any fear of God's word. Now, where they got the idea that there was something wrong with that, I hope they fear the fact that they can't breathe underwater. I hope they fear the fact that they better not open up the door on an airplane. You fear lots of things. Why not fear the one who set the rules to keep you safe? All my days, I don't know who could ever question that there was something wrong with fearing the Lord. But when these have had those kind of ideas planted in their heads, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do. You can just hope that they go far enough down the road to find out that they're wrong. And the bad part about those young people, when I was their age, when I was 21, I didn't know it at the time. I was as foolish as they are. Not to say I didn't fear the Lord, I just never thought about it. But they've actually thought about these things. But I never thought about it. But I didn't fear the Lord. I didn't. But what I didn't know at the time, which was a great thing, I had 30 more years. They don't have 30 years. It was about another 10 years before I figured it out. They don't have 10 years. They won't get 10 years. They're not going to have 10 more years to wallow in sin while they mull it over or whether they're going to fear Jesus or not. Anyway, in my dream, the liberals, I didn't know who they were at the time, but it was just, I knew it was the bad people. They were bad. They were evil. They were the ones that were causing all this trouble. They were the liberals. They just wanted to just destroy society. And these people, they are actually a creation. Just like if you have a godly person, that godly person is the product of the Word of God. They're the product of someone who has embraced faith in Jesus Christ and has washed themselves in the Word. They deny themselves and do what the Lord says, and it molds them into a new creature with certain characteristics, predictable characteristics. And by the same token, these liberals, they are also the product of a philosophy, of an agenda, of a concerted effort to produce just these type of people that would destroy society, that would create the chaos that was needed to destroy governments as they exist and to rear up an all-powerful government. To have these people who've they never have thought out the consequences of their actions. They're willing to do things that are unproven, that don't work. I don't know how to explain it, but they're just literally crazed, and they've been empowered. Okay, anyway, I don't know how to explain it any better, so I won't belabor it. So, but the thing about it was, the other side, which were the people who represented the status quo, so the liberals were trying to destroy society. The conservatives wanted to keep society the way it was. They represented the status quo, like the Donald Trump followers, make America great again. What they don't realize was America was never great from the beginning. I heard, I don't know when it was, a couple years ago, that racism, I heard this in either dream or something, where it said racism created Obama. No, these liberals, they look out and they do see real problems in the world. Their problem is they're choosing the wrong solution. Now, the problem with the conservatives is that because they failed to address real injustices that existed in the society, you create an environment for these horrible, twisted people to grow in. I hate to characterize them that way, but they just need Jesus. There's nothing you can do with a liberal. A liberal is a godless person. A gay rights supporting, same-sex marriage supporting, abortion marching, gospel hating, non-God fearing. What can I say about those people? They're ready to destroy society. There's nothing that what they're doing can bring except the judgment of God. But at the same time, the conservatives in my dream weren't right either. They weren't right either. Because if they had the morality to address the things that were wrong in the society, those people would not exist. The forces that want to take over the government, the forces of communism and the synagogue of Satan, through the Zionistic platform, they would not be able to take over society if there were not these pockets of discontentment in every society. If there had not been real, true racism in America, you could not have had a Barack Obama. You couldn't have a communist. You couldn't have a socialist. If people had cared more about justice. Is it right for you to just open the southern borders of the United States and bring in foreign people and give them welfare, raise their children, tax people to death in order to support these people? No, that's not right. But what also is not right is to deport, purposely separate kids from their families. That is unnecessary. Let them come over here, but don't set up welfare for them. No one should have this. No one should be doing this. And that's another thing about the liberal young people. They're just unrealistic. I mean, what is it about basic finances that you don't understand? If you're eating it, someone had to grow it. Someone had to pick it. Someone had to put it in a truck. Someone had to put it on the store shelves. Someone has to work and get a job to get the money to put it in your bag for you to take it out of the store and eat it. It's not right to put all that on some of the people. You don't fear the Lord, you won't believe the fact that if a man doesn't work, neither should he eat. You don't just mail people checks every month for breathing. You can't do it. You're stealing from someone who's working hard. Anyway, so neither one of the sides was right, but the liberals were clearly wrong. And I saw in the dream how the left, the liberals, they really were convinced they were right. And when they listened to the conservatives, they were convinced that the conservatives were the evil ones. And when the conservatives listened to the liberals, they were convinced that the liberals were evil, and just like no reason to even consider it any further. No reason to examine themselves. There was a lot of racism in America. And now the forces of Zionism, the forces that want to take over the world government, or already have, they used those things, exploited all those things to inflame and indoctrinate all the young people of this country. To convince them that if you get this great, big, powerful government, that great, big, powerful government can fix all these things. And it can't fix it. They're just using them. They're just using their naiveness. So it doesn't matter, politically speaking, who's right or who's wrong, because they're both wrong. If America had been great from the beginning, then we wouldn't be here. You wouldn't have had people willing to be bitten by dogs and squirted with fire hoses and yelled at and spit on, marching in the heat, marching on Washington. If America had been great, you wouldn't have even had those things. You wouldn't have had Jim Crow laws. You wouldn't have had second-rate schools. To have a Brown versus the Board of Education. There wouldn't have been anything for communistic, Satanistic, Zionistic people to exploit. They wouldn't have had anything to exploit. So that's how racism created Obama. That's how you create these angry people who are willing to rip your society and burn it down. and tear it down brick by brick and board by board, even though they're going to be destroyed right along with it. And no one's going to win. The only ones who are going to win are the people who have made preparations for their soul. Because even if God wasn't coming back to destroy the earth, human beings would shortly destroy it. The liberals are clearly wrong. The conservatives aren't right either, because what's right is what God says is right. Are they seeking the Lord? No. They're just concerned with protecting their property values and their 401ks. And they would be happy to go back to the way things were, where life was only good for some people and not pursuing a way of life that would be good for more people. To fight injustice, but not to fight it with the government, but not to participate in it. There's a channel, I'm not going to mention the name of it, but there's a guy, he lives in Australia, and he grew up in South Africa or Southern Africa. He's a white man. And he's just a racist. He's just a flaming, angry, hateful racist. And he speaks against the ANC government in South Africa. I think it stands for the African National Communist Party or something like that. It was the government of Nelson Mandela that took over the country. And so they have totally destroyed South Africa. They have run South Africa in the ground. And now the whites in South Africa are being persecuted. And the thing about this guy is that if you didn't have a problem with it when the white minority was oppressing the black majority, then it's hard for people to cry for you now when the tables are turned on you. Because when the whites had had control of the society, had they sought for the welfare of all of the people of their country, there would not have been the hostility built up in these people that was willing to boil over into what you have now. When you only seek your own good, the people who are left behind are growing bitter and angry. That's what Pharaoh was talking about when he said, let's oppress the Hebrews. Because if we ever have an enemy and they come along against us, then the Hebrew slaves will join with our enemy. So we're going to crush them down even more. That's what happens when you oppress people. You have a built-in enemy. Now, I'm not saying that I agree with what's being done to the white people there in South Africa. It's horrible. Their color shouldn't matter. No one should consider the color of a person who's suffering or the color of the person who's causing them to suffer. What's being done should be the only consideration, not who's doing it or what color they are. So it's terrible. But listening to this guy whose channel that is, that's telling about it, now he's telling the truth about the stuff that the ANC, the black majority government, is doing. They're destroying that country with corruption and mismanagement and bribes and political ineptness and nepotism, unqualified people in positions. They're just destroying the country, destroying it. They have absolutely no idea how to run a government. And they're making the country unfit to live in. It's going to be 10 times the hellhole that it was under apartheid. When you create these angry people, they're willing to burn down the house with themselves in it too. Anger and rage and hurt doesn't think, especially when they're being whipped up by the media. Black History Month is probably one of, it's a double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword. So there's a problem in South Africa. Big problem. Back in 2016, I heard this in a dream. It was being said to me over and over again. The next Soweto, the next Soweto, the next Soweto. And I looked it up at that time. Soweto was some riots that happened in South Africa under apartheid. Deadly riots. An uprising. Civil unrest. So South Africa is definitely on the verge of outright chaos. Outright chaos. But the man who's talking about it, this guy that lived in Australia, former white South African resident, everything he says is just, he's kind of like where the black people were. When you're being the victim of racism and you don't give your heart to God, you'll become worse than those people that were over you. if you let anger and hatred and bitterness build up in you. It's to the point where black people don't feel like they're capable of being racist. I've heard black people say that. I believed it the first time I heard it. Well, black people can't be racist because you have to be in the, you have to be in the political, you have to have political power, economic power, and whatever in order to be a racist. So if you don't have any mechanics of any of the mechanics of power, then you can't be a racist. They would say that. I heard that before. And there are people who will still quote that to you. Black people can't be racist because we're not controlling the country. So they're saying anger and prejudice, that's not racism. In order to have racism, you have to have power to oppress. That which is absolutely ridiculous. The tragedy of racism is on an individual level. We see it in society as a whole, but the real tragedy is on an individual level because only individuals will stand before the white throne judgment. Only individuals will stand before God. No groups are going to stand before God. No ethnic people. You're not going to stand before God as a voter bloc or as a club or as the Black Caucus or the Black Student Union or the skinheads. You are just going to stand before God as you and give an account of the deeds done in your body. And you're guaranteed to have evil deeds if you are bitter and angry and full of hatred and judging people by the color of their skin. Whether you judge them to be good because of the color of their skin or whether you think that they're someone who should be hated by the color of their skin. Anyway, so what's right is what God says is right. So the conservatives, while they can look out over the deeds and the words and the foolishness of the liberals and see that they're clearly wackos is the only word that comes to mind. Wackos. Brainwashed wackos. But before, as a conservative, you get too proud of yourself, you're not going to be judged up against the liberal. God's not going to lay out the political spectrum to see where you fell. Were you a political conservative? All we have is big government. In order to go back to true political conservatism, we probably have to go back to like the 1800s somewhere, early 1800s. Everybody in this country now, whether we know it or not, are, if you think this government is huge, it's humongous, it's running our lives. There's nothing small about this government. And all of us have become used to big government. None of us are prepared to live without a great big government. We need to. We would need to bite the bullet. It would mean going without your police force. It would be impossible now that people have gone so far into darkness. Now that the moral lights are out inside of most people, it'd be impossible. It'd be impossible. So as the people on the right look at the people on the left and see how crazy and gone they are, then they think that they're right. But if you're going to look at right, you can't look at the political spectrum. You have to go into the pages of the Bible. It's not about, do you go to work every day? Do you pull your own weight in society? That's not going to be the bottom line. The bottom line, did you look upon a woman to lust after her? So thereby, do you commit adultery every day? Are you having an affair? Are you moral by God's standards? Not just are you better than the next guy, better than those guys, just because you don't believe in gay marriage. Are you on your second wife? And your first one is still alive? Have you abandoned children and a woman? You sit in child support and taking care of your stepchildren and pouring more into their lives than you are your real children because you hate your first wife? The political right is not right. God is right. That's what I learned in this dream. And that's what I've been seeing a lot of, which made me want to share this dream. None of these people are right. The right is wrong. If they had been seeking God in the first place, the left wouldn't exist. God wouldn't allow these things to flourish. He said he would heal our land if my people who are called by my name would humble themselves and pray. Turn from their sins, seek my face. Then will I hear from heaven. Forgive our sins and heal our land. That's what's wrong in America. You're a political conservative. You're in the Tea Party. You don't believe in abortion. You voted for Donald Trump because he wasn't Hillary. He was the lesser of two evils. But you never, ever pray. You do not read your Bible. You do not worship God. You are not seeking God. You're just seeking a better life in this world. And you can see where the other guy is clearly serving the devil. But you don't see how you're not seeking God. God is not going to come and judge us by a man's standard. He's going to judge us by the standard that his son set. And then I wrote this. God went to great trouble in the Bible to demonstrate his hatred for mixture. Holiness is purity, and sin is adulterating what God set apart as holy. And so he calls it whoredom. When you mix a little bit of God in with your sins, and they're just totally godless, but you mix a little God in it, God just calls that adultery. It's just like when you don't leave your wife, but you have an affair. That's adultery. So God told Moses, he's told him something like, when he was making the tabernacle of witness for them to worship God in the wilderness, he said, see that you make it according to the pattern which you were shown in the mount. Moses was shown what that thing was to look like, down to how many rings the curtains would hang on. And he was supposed to replicate it exactly how he saw it. And that's how we're to serve Jesus. Do exactly what he said. He said his yoke is easy and his burden is light. He told us to come to him when we need rest and put his yoke on us. Because his yoke is so easy that you'll be resting while you carry it. But we have to worship him the way he said to worship him. We can't do our version of obeying God. You have to do it according to the pattern which you were shown, or you're not doing it. If Noah hadn't built the ark the way he was instructed to build it, it wouldn't have survived the flood. It wouldn't have been seaworthy. Remember King Ahab, the one who brought in Baal worship. He would inquire of God. They would say stuff, as the Lord liveth. But they were still mixing all that with Baal worship. And so then it was all Baal worship. Because you can't serve God and the devil. You can't love God and your 401k. All these people with that thing, don't tread on me. Don't tread on me. I never understood that. It's like they're saying that they're the snake. So they're a snake. I don't get that. They're just acknowledging that they're the devil. They don't realize it's not by power, it's not by might, but it's by my spirit, saith the Lord. You're not going to win because you're the biggest and the baddest. God's destroying the left and the right. Everything that's not really worshiping him. So what's really right is outside of both of these groups. Both the groups in my dream, the status quo and the liberals. So the narrative that they've been given to discuss the things that are on Fox and the things that are on MSNBC, whatever the liberal stations are, neither one of them are right. Both of those sides have a narrative. And they're both going to the pit. because it's not God. God doesn't have a TV network. You can be connected to him through his Holy Spirit because he'll come and live and abide in you and baptize you in the Holy Ghost. You can pick up his station any day by picking up a Bible. And you'll see that both of these groups are dead wrong. Yes, the liberals seem way crazier, and they are the ones that are making crazy in the world. Yes, they are. They're the ones who, Obama rode their wings right into becoming the Antichrist. But if you're going to be content to take on some definition of goodness that this world approves on, you're going to fall short before God. Because the world has just drifted so far away from God that what looks good, you take that back 50 years and it was disgusting. Divorces, adultery, pornography. How many of these right-wing guys are addicted to pornography? But because they're not marrying another man, you think that's going to make you acceptable before God? You're not going to turn on your TV set and see right. So if you look like anything you see on your TV, you're still in your sins. You have to turn off this dark world. Because you'll look like a light in this darkness. And you'll still be filth. Okay. These people are ready to kill each other. Ready to kill each other. So in the dream, got so far off track. So in the dream, some time passed, and the Tom Hanks character was older. So remember, Tom Hanks, he was fighting the liberals. So he was older, and he was a general, or a very, very powerful, and he was conducting resistance to the wild forces, the New World Orders, the wild forces. But he was clueless, and I knew that the young boys, the Brad Pitt's little brothers, that they were somewhere out there on opposite sides of this conflict. And they were thoroughly brainwashed for their side. One was a liberal and one was conservative. And they were ready to kill each other. Two brothers at each other. So, next in the dream, I heard a world news broadcaster saying that the new world power was considering starting a one world religion. And then that broadcaster was a male. He discussed how much this venture would be worth. So many billions of dollars. And he was speaking of it as if it was maybe like an evaluation for an IPO. It was like they were about to launch some public offering, like put it on the stock market for the one world religion. And it was saying how many billions of dollars it was worth. So, and then the scene on the screen for this broadcast was a lone soldier. I think he was Chinese, a Chinese soldier. And he was superimposed over the whole army. It was like the armies, you know how you see armies like marching? And it was a vast, vast, vast army, like a sea of soldiers. And then real big over all of them was just one soldier, like he represented all of them. And I believe he was a Chinese soldier. They were marching. And so all the religion, all the one world religion meant to them was, as it were, military force and economic gain. So this one world religion, it's not even going to be based on faith in anything. It's going to be just like everything else they do, doing it for the money. It's going to be just like Kenneth Copeland and T.D. Jakes and Marilyn Hickey and Benny Hinn and Perry Stone and all the rest of them. David, what was that guy's name? That one black preacher that had his videos of his deposition where he was charged with fraud or whatever. Can't think of his last name. But he was just, buying stuff at the Versace store and the Louis Vuitton shop with church funds. And in this dream, the one world religion, all just boiled down to money. How much money they could pump out of people in the name of false religion. So then I was trying to rewind it. I wanted to rewind that part about the news broadcast because I wanted to get more details about it, about the news report. Because remember, this was also a movie that I was watching from the past. But I ended up turning it off by accident. So I hope that wasn't too confusing. That's the best I can do right now. So I've been praying for everybody. I hope everybody's praying for me. Keep your eyes on the Lord. I'm going to try to make another video tomorrow or later on today. But just remember, nothing's right in this world. God is right. Donald Trump's not a godly man. He's not going to make America great again, because if America had been great in the first place, it would never got to where it is now. And if you're trying to make America great again, you have to start by repenting. He said he's never repented, didn't see any need for it. He said, I just try and do better next time. How could people can't be serious. Nobody who really knows the Lord could possibly think Donald Trump is a Christian. 4 or 5 wives. Casinos. Give me a break. I'm not even going to address that. If you think Donald Trump is a Christian, you need to read your Bible. God bless.